Well, and we're back. Hey, Anna, how are you?
New Year! Happy 2024!
Yeah, I can't believe it's 2024. It's like, I don't know, it seemed like just yesterday it was 2011.
I feel like just yesterday it was the year 2000, and like all of a
Yeah,
sudden it's 2024.
I know.
But another year of Climate Microdose. Thank you so much for being my co-host, and thank you all for tuning in and dosing with us week after week.
Yeah, this has been quite a journey. We started this as kind of like a hey, let's just keep up with what's happening, kind of in the climate space, and I feel like just the act of us kind of putting this together whenever we do, it helped me learn a lot in the process as well. There's been a lot of research that's gone into kind of the behind the scenes of this show.
For sure. And I feel like it's helped me form and voice my own opinions about it because
Mm,
usually, like maybe I'll talk to a friend about it or I'll think about it myself, but
yeah.
actually having to formulate an opinion about it really helps me stay clear about like how I feel and what should be going on. And I hope that it helps everybody out there too formulate their own opinions.
Yeah, no, I think it does too. And for those of you wondering why I look like a hip hop Sherlock Holmes, I don't like cold. I live in Texas for a real good reason. And this
You
morning
are a good
when I woke
Sherlock
up, it
Holmes.
was 28 degrees Fahrenheit. So
That's really cold. It's only 45 in New York.
yeah, it's so cold here. And then we've got supposed to be 2 inches of snow possibly coming in on Monday.
That's crazy.
It's
Well,
crazy.
the culprit for that is our good old friend climate change.
Right. I know. But it's funny. I always thought of like as a kid, global warming is like, oh, well, I'm okay with that because I like summer. But it's really it's the vast extremes on both ends, which I think a lot of people are starting to kind of see.
Sure, and it shifts the climate patterns for a specific land area like Texas. So,
Yeah.
like, you're used to experiencing one kind of climate pattern, which is sunny, warm utopia. And then you'll
Oh yeah.
suddenly have, an onslaught of rain or snow or sleet,
I mean, don't get
things that
carried
actually
away. I wouldn't call it a utopia, but it's not bad.
no, I just mean like weather-wise. It's like,
Yeah.
you think it's sunny, but old climate change rolls in, and suddenly, I mean, honestly, the infrastructure can't handle
No,
snow. It can't handle a lot of rain because you're not used to that.
that's
So,
right.
it really causes a lot of delays and a lot of problems.
That's true. And we I think if it gets like this in New York, you guys have trucks that can clear things, and we
Yeah.
sort of have that, but not really.
We have like a lot of city employees on payroll
Yeah.
who have like the salt trucks ready and the snow cleaner machine things. Sorry, I don't know what those are called.
So
Ready.
you have salt trucks. We have assault trucks. Very different.
It's an election year, so get ready for climate
Uh,
microdose to
oh
talk
my
about.
goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
I know that's another thing is like the fact that it's an election year really hit me in the face. Like I feel like we just went through this and it was super traumatic, and now we're going through it again with like the same two candidates. Unless Ron DeSantis wiggles his way in there,
You know what
which
I find funny is that I go to Australia or Portugal or something, and to think about like their politics and what they do, it's like foreign, literally foreign to me. But yet, it seems like everyone knows what's happening with the U.S. It's like
because we're
it's like the
superficial.
black sheep of the world in some ways. We're like, oh my
Like a
god,
soap
did you see
opera.
what they did? Yeah, I know. It's funny because people would always ask me. They would say, oh, where are you from? I said, oh, I'm from Texas. Isn't that the United States? Why don't you say you're from the U.S. or America? And I'm like, well, because Texas used to be its own country.
You are such a funny dichotomy of a person. Like in one being, you're both like an ocean climate scientist, like a AI guy, and like a diehard Texan.
I do no, but I really do. I would say like there's two states I really like the most, and I would say that's Texas and Hawaii. And it seems like those two things are so far opposite from each other, but in many ways they're very similar. I mean, they
Yeah.
both of them used to be their own country, and if you go talk to an average person that's living in Hawaii, they're going to tell you how great Hawaii is. Texas is no different. They're going to do the same thing. They're going to tell you how wonderful Texas is. Everything's bigger. Everything's better here. I mean, within reason. Perspective is key.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Hawaii is such a beautiful place that's unlike anywhere else in the world.
No,
And it
agreed.
has its own kind of like landmass and animals and indigenous culture that lives there. It's kind of interesting to think about it as part of the United States because it feels like it's so different.
Yeah.
I actually, for the holidays, I bought my boyfriend this Maui Nui venison. Have you heard about it?
I haven't heard of it.
On like every podcast, and I just kept hearing it. And you guys, podcast advertising works because as soon as I kind of clicked in that that's what I wanted to get him, I got it. And so in Hawaii, there's this invasive population of deer. Somebody, maybe like in the 80s, brought over 9 deer from the mainland, and they started wreaking havoc on the local kind of wildlife and population and ocean runoff, all of these kind of horrible problems that happened because they were an apex predator and there was nobody to kind of like control the population of deer. And this company, obviously not sponsored by them, but I just think it's really cool. Maui Nui, they have decided to take on kind of the old ways of hunting and take care of these animals in a really beautiful way and turn them into nutritious venison with like higher protein qualities, higher, nutrition percentages than a normal piece of meat because of how they treat the venison. And they hunt it, like they carry the meat on its backs. They use these really kind of indigenous ways of hunting. And I just think it's a really, really, really beautiful outlook that like only the Hawaiians could have come up with as a solution to deal with this like invasive population, instead of just like, how can we kill them? Like, let's root them out, root and stem. They're out here like, okay, people need protein. This has a high source of protein. What can we do to like make sure that we're actually creating a beautiful cycle of life here?
Right. No, I think that's important, and I think I think that a lot of these species have been introduced over the years, and it creates a problem with the ecosystem when there's no kind of natural predator. A place like Hawaii, it's one of the most remote archipelagos on the planet. So
Yeah.
so it's interesting to hear that, and that is a problem. I mean, I think if you could find ways to be as sustainable as possible without relying on imports, like that's really, in a place like Hawaii, I think that's really important. So it's awesome.
Exactly. You were just there, weren't you?
I was, yeah. We are working on a new film that's directly related to the removal of chemical and conventional weapons. The foundation, my foundation, is called the Furthermore Foundation, and we're actively working on a mission to remove 2 bombs that are at the Molokini site. We've got some really amazing experts that this is what they do all day, every day.
Wow.
And so we've been working on this for a while. Some people have come in, some people have come out, but I've promised that hell or high water, I'm not giving up. We're gonna figure out how to solve this problem. So we've
Wow, I
got,
had no idea you were even working on that. You are just a never-ending tale of surprises and adventures. Wait,
well,
so what's going on? So the bombs, they're stuck there?
yeah. So it started this originally back in 2020. There was I guess I had seen stuff on social media, and this is actually how it all started. There was a young girl who had decided to put a change.org petition together. And so far, as of today, I think it's got 300,000 signatures. But yeah, the government was going to detonate 2 bombs that were at the Molokini site. And for those that don't know, Molokini, if you go to Maui, is a little crater, a little atoll that's just off of McKenna on the south part of the island. And it's a beautiful place. If you ever go snorkeling or scuba diving, that's most likely where they're going to take you. So here you have this coral reef system, and you get these 2 bombs. Now, on one side of the argument, you're like, well, what if somebody touches it? It could detonate. It could kill all those people. So
Wait,
that is a
why did they
problem.
put it there in the first place?
Well, there's a number of reasons. Those particular bombs were probably accidents. There's another island that's just on the other side. It's called Ko'olave. Ko'olave is a sacred site to indigenous Hawaiians. That has something there called the chair. That is where Hawaiians would go before they would set off to voyage, because they could see the stars, they could see all of the channels. And so it's very, very important to Hawaiian history. and the U.S. government for ages used it as target practice, and so there were enormous amounts of unexploded ordnances all over Ko'olave and in the water. It's my understanding that 75% of the bombs on the ground of Ko'olave have been removed, but 100% of all of the bombs that were in the ocean have not been touched yet. So it's still heavily polluted. So that's what that's the first thing that most Hawaiians think about when we talk about this. But what most don't understand is that when you finish a war, you end up with a surplus of these bombs. What do you do with them? Well, for many years, it was acceptable to just dump them in the water as a form of disposal. And so Hawaii not only has these bombs that were left over from some of this target practicing, but it also has specific dump sites. And these are not limited to conventional weapons that you would think of that explode, but also chemical weapons, chemical warfare. So,
oh my God.
where we just off Hana, about 4 miles or so out to sea, there's a massive cache of mustard gas in containers that is, in the ocean.
Just waiting to detonate.
It's not, those didn't detonate. These are the kinds of really horrible things that, they're no longer, it's against the Geneva Convention and whatnot, but so these things exist. So it's like, well, if you have this stuff and you're not allowed to have it anymore, what do you do with it? Dump it in the ocean. And they did that until like the late 1970s or so. And I think we collectively started to realize that, the ocean was starting to have enough of this nonsense.
And key to our survival as a people.
Yeah. And so the question is now, it's like, well, now you have all these other problems. If you remove the bomb, you remove the problem, right? But in many of the military circles, they're like, well, what if we just detonate in place? Then it no longer becomes a threat to the people. While the detonation is no longer a threat, you're adding more TNT to the water column, which means you're adding more of these chemicals that end up in the coral reef systems, that end up in the fish. We eat the fish, and it's one of the leading causes of cancer in many populations around these areas.
That's true.
Yeah, so Vieques, Puerto Rico is a prime example. It's the largest population of cancer patients, and there's no industry there. There's not even a hospital, unfortunately, on Vieques. You have to come to San Juan to be treated.
I was just in San Juan. Yeah. I didn't hear anything about that.
You're not going to. This is something that's been going on for quite some time, and very little has been done, if anything. You can go back and look in the 90s. There's some news articles. I think I don't quote me, but I think it was like 60 Minutes or something had a piece on it.
What is under current issues at the military?
Nothing ever happened. And so Hawaii was really the first place that said, hey, you know what? Let's do something about this. And so we were able to put a group of people together, and we had House Resolution number 135 passed, thanks to Tina Wildberger, who at the time she was in the House over there in the state of Hawaii. But anyway, I've been working on this since 2020 with a bunch of these folks. Everybody is a team player on this, and we've just been trying our best. And we got I don't want to say who the filmmaker is or anything just yet, or the name of the film, but we had someone come and say, hey, we'd really like to follow this process. So there's gonna be a lot more coming on this, and so we started doing a little bit of filming while we're on Maui.
We're here to cover it. So just a little bit more on this, because I'm so curious. Does the film kind of give you a solution, or is it more to raise awareness that this is happening?
And we're actively removing these bombs. So we are providing the solution. It's just this is the documentation of the process and really the history of how they got there to begin with.
So it's a dive, and somebody's actually taking this thing themselves.
Yep.
That sounds incredibly dangerous.
Yep, I will be down there in many cases, working with a lot of these. And Dr. James Porter, he'll be part of this as well. Dr. James Porter, I think if you guys ever saw the film Chasing Coral, he was the expert in that film. And man, he's just been a wealth of information. He's been working on this issue for quite some time. He worked on the issue in Vieques. And so our hope is that, Hawaii can be, this pebble that's dropped into the pond that creates waves along the shoreline. I think that all it takes is one person to say, hey, yeah, this is a problem. Let's do something about it. And thankfully the state rose to the occasion. We're really excited about that.
That's great. That's amazing. I mean, it's a great example of like a win-win-win solution for everybody, which is what we're always talking about in the climate space. It's a win for the planet, it's a win for the people, and it's a win for like governments and economies and,
Yeah,
social network.
for sure. For sure. So yeah, that's what I was on Maui for. It was great. It's always great to get back. I absolutely. That's my. It's almost my favorite island. There's one island that I would say is probably my favorite in far north Queensland, but Maui is a strong second.
Yeah, I mean, it's so beautiful there. And I mean, thank you for doing that work and for educating us about it. It's up to us to kind of raise awareness about these kind of little known issues.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's, different examples of this kind of thing that the military or that warfare has brought, that only like years later after some of the smoke, pun intended, has cleared,
Right.
that we're actually able to take a look at and see.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's classic of what we don't understand. I mean, when we look at the ocean, we see the horizon. It's like, wow, it's so beautiful, but less than 0.01% of the world has put their head beneath the surface of the ocean. And
You were telling me that
yeah,
when we were in the Dominican Republic last year, and I just
yeah,
find that so.
yeah. Isn't that crazy? Well, I mean, there's about 9 million or so scuba divers in the world, and there are 8 billion people on the planet. And so having access to the life that exists in the ocean, even though that's the most abundant life on the planet, we don't get to see it as a human family. We don't get to see it as much as we probably should. I think if we did, Jacques Cousteau used to always say people protect what they love, but they can't protect what they don't understand. And the whole idea of getting people to see not just the wonders of the ocean, but the threats and what's left to fight for. And
Yeah.
and I think that puts the impetus on every one of us to say let's go do something.
100%. Well, speaking of the ocean, I feel like some news came out this week in the Atlantic that we wanted to tell everybody about.
Yeah, you're talking about the extreme weather data. You're talking about this one,
The Guardian, I'm
the
sorry.
Guardian. Yeah. Okay, I was like at the Atlantic. Are you talking about the ocean? Wait, did I miss it? Did I get the
I think
wrong button?
the ocean, it
Yeah.
got mixed up in there. We're live, so we're here with all the goofs and gaffs.
I know it is. It is. Yeah. I mean, I think it's no secret that we had one of the hottest years on record, and this graph here. I don't know if I can actually. Will it let me zoom? Sometimes it lets me zoom. Sometimes not. Let's see here. Here we go. There
Oh,
we
zoom
go.
in.
There we go. Zooming. So, I mean, this gives you kind of a perspective of how hot the ocean was. And I think this also is indicative of kind of the things that I've been thinking about lately, because it's like, there are nature-based solutions that can solve a lot of these problems, right? Well, on the planet. And I always think about like, okay, well, we've got 36, 37 gigatons of carbon that's emitted into the atmosphere every year. Of course, we've also got methane, right? Methane is kind of another animal because it's 25 times more potent as a greenhouse gas. However, the one thing that people don't normally associate with that data is they don't tell you that CH4, methane, lasts about 10 years in the atmosphere, whereas CO2 sits there for much longer. So in many cases, if we could stop CH4 production into the atmosphere, we could start to see a really measurable impact within the next decade or so.
Yeah.
But this gives you an idea when someone says, "Oh, well, the ocean's temperature is rising." This is a stark contrast in a period of time that just relatively short. I mean, we're starting to see things right at 2000, 2001 really shift into overdrive. And that's really not that long ago, if you think about it. And so,
I mean, in terms of the Earth, it's not even the blink of an eye. It's like,
not even.
just a tiny minute. But so, Jeremy, tell us what it means when the ocean gets hotter. Because for some people, like you said, they feel like global warming is like, oh, it'll be easier for me to step into the ocean. Like, I don't have to get used to it for as long as I used to, or something like that.
Yeah,
Tell us what it means on kind of like a global scale and
sure.
maybe a more specific scale in terms of certain populations.
Well, I mean, I think the first thing we have to realize and is that the ocean is the world's largest carbon sink, right? It's the very thing that regulates temperature here on planet Earth, or Buckminster Fuller would say, spaceship Earth, right? That's really what this is, if you think about it, because we're all just crew members here floating on this rock, tumbling through
Floating
space,
around
right?
a hot
And
rock.
right, and so, it's in our best interest to be able to manage our life support systems so that we can stay on this spaceship. What's interesting is that when we think of like typhoons or hurricanes, this is actually the natural process that the Earth goes through to start the cool down process. So when we think of extreme events, we're like, oh, this is horrible. This is a natural process to kind of get back to the natural order of things.
Right.
And so when we have accelerated temperatures, that means that we're going to have accelerated, natural disasters. Specifically, yeah, that's right. So, when we look at the types of weather conditions that we've had over the past year or so, they're directly correlated to the temperature of the ocean. And I mean, every meteorologist broadcast that you see when there's a hurricane coming towards the United States, the one thing that they always talk about is the temperature of the surface of the ocean.
Yes.
And how it's going to just supercharge that storm. Well, the reason why it's supercharging is because you've got that convection happening. You've got that heat that's rising up through the air, and it's just rapidly cooling and trying to, get that cool air around as much as possible. But as long as that ocean stays hot, the more powerful those storms are going to become.
Right. And when those two things meet, so the cool air and the hot ocean, that's the recipe for disaster right there.
Absolutely.
Because that's what makes the storms that much more powerful.
Absolutely. And so, I think, the thing I'm thinking about is like, okay, great. So we've got 37 gigatons. I think that's the number these days. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, anybody. From my understanding, and I have these long, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I ask childlike questions to these groups of scientists, because I feel like that's the best way to understand, so that I can explain to someone else. But my understanding is that, we've got 36 gigatons of carbon, and then 1/3 of that can be sequestered by nature-based systems. So, this means that we still have a huge problem on our hands if we're going to try to make a measurable impact by 2030. And 2030 is just around the corner. It's, 6 years away, essentially.
I mean, look how close 2024 came. So give us an example of a nature-based solution.
Yeah, so, nature-based solutions on how to sequester carbon, quite simply, is a tree, right? A tree is really simple, right? And on many ways, it uses photosynthesis, and it converts CO2 into oxygen or breathable air. And it's that photosynthesis is solar powered, which is kind of cool, right? But it only can handle so much, and then it also is required to have a healthy water system. It's healthy soil system, and trees don't live forever, and they die. And when they die, they release carbon back into the atmosphere, and so we have to be able to continue to make sure that other systems can offset some of those things. The other things are seagrass. Seagrass is probably the fastest way to sequester enormous amounts of carbon. And then you've got things like mangroves. Mangroves also do a number of things. They not only do they sequester carbon, each tree can, depending on the species, 14 to 20 years, depending on a lot of the other conditions as well. But they can sequester enormous amounts of carbon, and they store it in the soil, in the sediment. They also are a nursery for fisheries. Sharks like to have their pups there. And then they also prevent coastal erosion. So when you have these major storm surges, those roots that are inside of the sand keep it from washing up and having these major waves coming in and crushing into us, which is really nice. So we look at all of those kinds of things, and those are these nature-based solutions. So that accounts for 1/3. Right, and of course I'm not going to discredit also the Amazon and other rainforests. Those are super important. We have to have those. That's what the
Earth is equipped with. Like, it can deal with its own carbon sequestration if we let it have its own cycle, without interference. But what we do is kind of pump thousands and thousands of liters of CO2.
We have energy requirements, and it's important. I was, so because we have those energy requirements, 1/3 should be nature-based solutions. 1/3 should be reduction, right? So we have to figure out how do we reduce the amount of carbon footprint that we have, or at least make our carbon footprint count for more, right? Like think of it like an investment. If you're going to use your carbon for something, make it count for something, that's going to do something to draw down carbon overall somewhere else.
Spread the message of climate,
Could be that too.
like that.
And I would say the final third would be you know synthetic forms of sequestration, right? So this would be like direct to capture technologies. Although I'm not a huge fan of it. I think it's very expensive. It's about $1,200
Right now,
or
right?
so, $1,200 per ton, whereas nature-based solutions are about $33 per ton. Massive difference. And a molecule is a molecule is a molecule. A CO2 molecule is the same over a direct to air capture facility as it is over a forest of mangroves. So I think we really need to sort the business model of that, how that actually works. But there's no way that we can just rely on direct to air capture or just rely on nature based solutions. We have to use these from all sides. It's like surrounding the enemy from all sides to win. That's essentially what we're trying to do with the climate crisis.
Yeah, and just get creative about how we can do that and make sure that the money that's coming into the climate space now, I mean, there's been a ton of promises made over COP28, and we'll see what's going to happen, in Davos next week. But I think, and at least it feels to me from an optimistic point of view, like a lot of capital is starting to flow into these climate solutions, and that it's being kind of handled and used in a way that's going to, like you said, surround the climate problem from all sides.
Yeah.
And what I really like, and what kind of the ethos of some of the groups like Top Tier Impact that we're both in is the idea of like, it's not that I have this proprietary technology and I don't want anybody to use it and I'm just gonna hit the bell of my patent and cash in at the bank. The idea is I've created something that works. Now I want to give it to you as fast as I can so that you can use it to make something that works better and bigger in your ecosystem and in your environment. Because the thing is, it's kind of like we're in a relay race and the bell is going to ding soon. So we all kind of have to be part of the same team and pass that ball as fast as we can instead of trying to be the star of the team.
It's super hard, honestly. I mean, like you can say that, but at the end of the day, we have all grown up with a mindset of like, intellectual property, it's ours. I remember an old professor said, who knows what intellectual property is? And a few students made some comments, and he took a balloon and blew it up. And he said, the intellectual property that I own is inside this balloon. It's my air. Right. And so how do I prove to you that this is my air? And so I think about that illustration a lot. And I think when I hear about people working on things, I think of the term hot air, right? So, we both on both connotations on that scenario and kind of the negative one. It's like, all right, well, how do we then be like, cool, you're doing something that's in my space, but maybe there's a way to collaborate. I will often find people who are, I would say competitive to OCN.ai, our company. And my first gut reaction is sometimes like, oh, you're stepping on my space. And then I have to remind myself, like, that's the old way of doing business. Now, what if we look at those potential ideas, like you were saying, as a big Venn diagram? There's going to be overlap. How much of an overlap is there? But what are they really good at that you don't do? And can you partner? Yeah. And I think if we can all think that way, then 2030 comes around, and I think that we'll make a measurable impact. But right now, we've got our work cut out for us.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that it's the old way of doing things, and that what we're doing here is trying to build a new paradigm.
Yeah.
And it's super hard because money still works the same way, banks still work the same way, things still cost even more money than they're used to. So you still feel this kind of friction from the economy side of things, to come out on top. But I really believe that if we start to really disintegrate some of that and take a look at, no one person, no one company, no one government is fully, ready to handle the climate crisis, that there's no hole, nothing left untapped,
Yeah.
And the idea that somebody who has worked on an area that you maybe are not so familiar with can come in and help you, that means you can activate that much faster and
Yeah.
help your economy and your environment that much faster. And the biggest thing to understand, I think, here, and we talked a little bit about this, is the idea that, the climate crisis is going to be an economic crisis, like very quickly. It already is in so many parts of the world. If you don't have a climate solution that's coming with your business solution, that's not really going to be good business in the next 6 years, but even in the next 2 years. Like, it's really becoming more and more apparent that having that climate solution is what's going to help you come out. We all, I think, need to start really embodying this idea, and then coming to things like Davos, coming to business collaborations, even looking for a new job if you're an individual, as to just how we can collaborate a little bit more, and put down some of that old thinking. And some of the people that need to do that the most are the ones that hold the financial capital.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I mean, I think that, I was telling somebody the other day, I was like, if you could tell the story of conservation through the language of finance, like basically meaning put it on a spreadsheet. If you can put it on a spreadsheet, then everyone will understand it. And then through that process, everyone becomes a de facto, conservationist, right? Because it's like, that's the one language and thing that we've grown up understanding is finance. We understand when money's in the account and when money's not in the account. And how can we use that simple process, this, basic addition and subtraction, to really drive the point home that the more we subtract from the ocean, the less we have is in time to live. And I think that's the thing that I think is probably the one, unifier on this planet.
100%. Even if you have a beautiful multi-million-dollar beachfront estate, that estate is going to lose value, and it's going to be in danger the more
Right.
that the climate crisis is able to go unchecked. So the climate crisis, it's just going to affect you no matter what standing you have in this life.
Yeah.
And I think that we, as people working in the climate industry, but also folks who are just kind of peripherally starting to think about what they can do, um, there's always a baton that you can pick up. I always talk about the local composting initiatives here in New York City. P.S. Update: a anonymous donor donated to save New York City compost until midsummer, where their vote is going to happen again. So we're able to keep our composting facilities open.
Wow.
Thanks to a philanthropist out there.
Wow.
So
Amazing.
it's amazing, but it's also kind of sad and strange that we're relying on individuals to solve some of these
I don't know. I
problems.
mean, I look, no discredit to folks that are in government, but I sometimes feel like the people that are in government, they're not the people who start companies. They're not the people who are focused on philanthropy and see the bigger picture. Sometimes it's folks that are just there showing up for work and doing their job, and good for them, right? But
Yeah, I
but
hear you.
maybe these types of things will help those in those positions, help them see the bigger, broader picture and realize how important that job role really is.
Totally. And how important, things like community compost and nature-based solutions, like you said,
Yeah.
are worth the investment in, because once those fail safes fail, we're in for a much bigger problem.
Yeah,
But
for
Jeremy,
sure.
as usual, we went all over the place
We
today, and
did.
I feel like I really learned a lot.
I mean, I always do. I mean, even just by hanging out. It's funny. I think it's my grandma once told she used this in the term of the family. Sometimes I'm sure your family's the same way, where it's like, oh, you haven't called me in a while. How come you don't call me anymore? Right? It's like
Mhm.
grandma would always say, she's like, yeah, you haven't called me, but I'm calling you because it's not important who calls, but just that the call is made. And
Mm.
so I think sometimes in these conversations, it's great that it's like, well, sometimes we'll talk about a bunch of stuff, and it's kind of like Seinfeld. It's like a show about nothing. But at the end of the day, like there are some really great nuggets that maybe we wouldn't have thought of if we hadn't been exposed to some of these conversations. So I'm always grateful to be here.
I studied improv for a long time. I think there's like a real magic that happens when you're playing off somebody else, especially when you're talking about climate. And that's what Microdose is all about.
100%. 100%. You've
Well,
never
we have
told
an
a joke on
insane.
climate. I didn't know about the improv thing. You've never told a joke. You've got,
Really? You
yeah,
didn't know that? I thought I
yeah.
told you.
No, I didn't know that. We'll have
I
you
did
do
it.
some improv next time. That'll be the opener.
Sure, sure. Well, the whole thing about improv is like, you need a team, so I need you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did it. I did it for a long time at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater here in New York City, and it
Amazing.
was the best years of my life.
Yeah. So do you have like a whole skit and everything like you've written?
So improv is like about the spontaneous
Oh,
action.
okay, okay, gotcha. Okay.
So it's not skit writing and sketch comedy, which is like when you're actually like sitting down and writing something. Improv is like you get a suggestion from the audience and then the team kind of just like makes something up on the spot. It's like that magic.
Okay, okay, I got you. All right. So more like whose line is it anyway kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly like
Okay,
that.
got
Exactly
it.
like that.
Well,
Yeah.
that sounds
So
like a
a little
great
bit of an
next
extra
episode.
bonus for the audience learning about improv versus sketch comedy. And
Right.
I definitely recommend doing it, even if you don't want to be a comedian. It's just such a good way to use different parts of your brain
Yeah.
and to get yourself ready for whatever life throws your way.
Amazing. Well, as usual, see, look, there's a bunch of things we learned in this one little session here. You learned about bombs in the ocean. I learned about improv. This is great.
I had no idea about the bombs in the ocean. My mind is
Yeah.
blown.
Yeah, I see what you did there. And I don't know. Wait a second. Do I even have? Oh, here we go. Yep, here we go. Little delayed, but I do have it.
I got the laugh. That's all I wanted. Well, once again, thanks for joining us. Happy New Year. We're so excited for all the things that we have for you coming up this year. We have a very exciting guest coming up, some new topics to explore. And as always, we're open to suggestions. If you want to hop on with us, we love collaborating. The more, the merrier. And we'd love to hear from our beautiful audience out there.
Awesome. See you next time, everyone.
Have a great week.